Breaking news has just emerged from Ouagadougou that has shaken the world. Burkina Faso President Ibrahim Traoré made a historic decision this morning that has rattled the foundations of the global financial system. Events at the government palace in the capital, Ouagadougou, have created major reverberations in world economic circles. The extraordinary cabinet meeting that began at 9 o'clock local time was interrupted by unexpected developments. Traoré's order marked a milestone not only for Burkina Faso, but for the entire African continent. This bold move by the young leader calls into question the activities of international financial institutions in Africa. Everything began last week with the work of a special audit commission established within Burkina Faso's Ministry of Finance. The team of young technocrats scrutinized the country's agreements with the World Bank. The dire dimensions of the picture that emerged from the investigations deeply shook everyone. According to commission reports, Burkina Faso has paid 15 times the principal amount in interest to the World Bank since 1960. Even more striking was the discovery that most of these loans were used for phantom projects, road projects, hospital constructions, and school building that appeared on paper were never actually implemented. Despite this, payments were made regularly, interest was charged, and debts grew exponentially. In-depth research by finance experts brought incredible documents to light. Secret protocols signed between World Bank representatives and the country's former leaders, commission agreements, and documents showing bribery traffic were revealed one by one. The most striking document was a secret protocol signed by the administration in 2019, pledging 40% of Burkina Faso's gold reserves as World Bank collateral. Moreover, this agreement was kept completely secret from Parliament and the public. Audit Commission Chairman Professor Amadou Sawadogo stated in his report, "The people of Burkina Faso have been subjected to systematic economic exploitation for half a century. The documents in our possession clearly show that this situation is not accidental, but rather a planned and deliberate plunder mechanism." When the files reached President Traoré's desk, the young leader's reaction was fierce. According to palace sources, Traoré experienced great anger while reviewing the documents. He immediately ordered that World Bank West Africa Regional Director James Morrison be summoned to the palace. Morrison arrived at the palace with his delegation in the afternoon. However, he was stunned by the surprise awaiting him. He was taken to the meeting room under tight security measures by palace guards. Traoré was waiting standing, and the expression on his face showed the seriousness of the situation. The dialogue that took place in the meeting was historic. Traoré began speaking by firmly placing the files on the table. "Mr. Morrison, I have documents to show you. Documents showing how you have robbed my country and my people for 50 years. Fake projects, phantom loans, exorbitant interest rates, and much more. Burkina Faso's apparent debt is $4 billion. But we have paid you $23 billion to date. What kind of mathematical understanding is this?" Morrison's attempt at defense was harshly cut off by Traoré. "Don't talk to me about standard procedures, Mr. Morrison. This is called organized plunder, and it ends today. I'm giving you 24 hours. Either you cancel these unjust debts and return what you've stolen, or I'll arrest you and your team for economic war crimes." Morrison's claim of diplomatic immunity was rejected by Traoré. Those who commit economic genocide cannot have immunity. The documents are in my hands. The evidence is clear. Our courts will judge you, and you will receive the punishment you deserve. After the meeting, Traoré appeared before the national and international press. At the press conference held in the palace garden, behind him were the Burkina Faso flag and a portrait of national hero Thomas Sankara. The young leader's statements resonated throughout the world. "Dear Burkinabe brothers and all African peoples, today is a historic day. We are exposing 50 years of lies and plunder. We will stop the global exploitation machine operating under the name of the World Bank. Our fathers were deceived. Our grandfathers were fooled. But this game is now over. Africa's wealth belongs to African peoples, and no one can steal from us. As Traoré showed the documents to the cameras, journalists present experienced great shock. Among the documents were secret agreements signed by former heads of state, commission receipts, and bank statements showing bribery traffic. Immediately after the announcement, large demonstrations began in the streets of Ouagadougou. Thousands of Burkinabés gathered in front of the World Bank office. Slogans of "We want our money back" were chanted. University students carried banners supporting Traoré. Women joined the protests by banging pots and pans. On social media, the hashtag number Traoré's World Bank quickly rose to the top of the global agenda. Millions of Africans sent messages of support to the young leader. Comments were made saying, "Finally, a brave leader who stands up to imperialism has emerged." Support statements began coming from all corners of the African continent. Mali President Assimi Goïta went down in history as the first leader to offer support. Burkina Faso is not alone in this struggle. We too have been subjected to the same plunder system. The time has come to act together. Niger leader Abdourahmane Chiani went even further, calling for all Sahel countries to review their relations with the World Bank. Traoré's courage should be an example to all of us. Africa is now awakening and seeking its rights. Guinea President Mamadi Doumbouya made similar statements. Our young brother Traoré is on the right path. We will also take similar steps soon. Africans should manage Africa's resources. Surprising support came from Uganda. Veteran leader Yoweri Museveni praised his young colleague. What Traoré has done is what we should have done 50 years ago. It's a belated but correct step. An emergency crisis meeting was held at World Bank headquarters in Washington. President Ajay Banga gathered all regional directors. The risk of the Burkina Faso incident spreading to other African countries was discussed. Concerns were expressed that if a domino effect begins, all our operations in Africa will be endangered. International Monetary Fund President Kristalina Georgieva made an urgent statement calling on Burkina Faso to be moderate. However, this call was met with backlash in Africa. Georgieva's statement was interpreted as the panic of colonizers. The Paris administration activated diplomatic channels. Macron's Africa advisor was urgently sent to Ouagadougou. The French Foreign Ministry warned Traoré. However, the young leader refused to receive the French delegation. The message was sent. First, we'll solve the World Bank issue. Then we'll settle accounts with you too. The statement from the United States State Department drew criticism. It said, "We expect Burkina Faso to comply with international rules." However, African experts noted that these were neo-colonial rules. The development in the afternoon surprised everyone. James Morrison and his team tried to leave the country secretly. However, Traoré had considered every possibility. Special security units stopped Morrison at the airport. His passport was confiscated and he was brought back to the palace. Meanwhile, the support statement from the People's Republic of China attracted attention. The Beijing administration stated that every country's right to economic independence should be respected. The China Development Bank offered interest-free loans to Burkina Faso. This offer caused discomfort in the West. The Russian Federation made a harsher statement. The Moscow administration characterized the World Bank's activities in Africa as neo-colonialism. Putin's spokesman Dmitry Peskov said they appreciated Traoré's courage. African peoples have the right to determine their own destiny. In the evening hours, a major leak occurred on social media. The World Bank's secret correspondence was leaked online. Documents showed that African countries were systematically trapped in debt. The document titled "Strategy to Keep Poor Countries in Debt Forever" went viral. The details in the documents were horrific. how African leaders were bought, which banks bribes were deposited into, were written one by one, how media organizations were directed, and how opposing voices were silenced was explained. Towards midnight, Burkina Faso security forces took action. All World Bank offices in Ouagadougou were sealed. Safes were confiscated. Documents found inside were delivered to the prosecutor's office. Traoré announced that all these documents would be used in court. The African Union held an extraordinary meeting in Addis Ababa. 41 of the 53 member countries decided to support Traoré. A commission was established to review relations with the World Bank. The president of the African Development Bank said the continent needs to establish its own financing system. The people of Ouagadougou were on the streets until morning. A vigil was held in front of the World Bank office. Slogans of "We won't let Morrison escape" were chanted. Young people stayed up all night by lighting fires. Traoré's posters were hung everywhere. "Our hero leader" was written on walls. Western media tried to distort the events. CNN International characterized Traoré as populist. BBC World Service claimed economic disaster was at the door. Financial Times ran the headline, "Burkina Faso commits economic suicide." However, African media continued to write the truth. Time was advancing rapidly, and the 24 hours given to Morrison were about to expire. News from Washington was contradictory. Some sources said the World Bank would back down. Others claimed an economic embargo would be imposed on Burkina Faso. As the morning sun rose over Ouagadougou, the historic moment arrived. Morrison was brought back to the palace. Traoré was waiting determinedly. The meeting room was open to journalists. The whole world was watching this moment live. Morrison began to speak with a trembling voice. "I spoke with headquarters. They accept debt restructuring. They can make a 50% reduction." Traoré shook his head. "I don't want restructuring. I want cancellation. I want the return of the stolen $23 billion. Morrison's face turned ashen. "This is impossible. The World Bank doesn't have such authority." Traoré stood up. "Then you are under arrest, Mr. Morrison. You will be tried for economic war crimes." At Traoré's signal, security forces handcuffed Morrison. The World Bank director was being arrested for the first time in history. Morrison, shouting, "I have diplomatic immunity," received a cold look from Traoré. "Those who commit genocide have no immunity." Morrison and his 5-person team were taken to Ouagadougou Central Prison. When the images were broadcast to the world, panic began in financial markets. World Bank shares lost 12% of their value. Western banks operating in Africa went on alert. Traoré addressed the people again at noon. He spoke to the 100,000 people gathered in Thomas Sankara Square. "Dear brothers, today we declare our true independence. No one will rob us anymore. Our wealth is ours. Our gold is ours. Our uranium is ours. We will use these for the welfare of our people." Throughout the speech, the people enthusiastically applauded Traoré. Slogans of "Long live independent Burkina Faso" rose to the sky. Support messages from all corners of Africa were read. Young girls performed traditional dances. The elderly prayed in tears. This event was a turning point not only for Burkina Faso, but for all of Africa. No African country would be the same anymore. The World Bank and similar institutions would not be able to operate freely in Africa, because now there were brave leaders like Traoré. As the reverberations of the event continued, similar movements began in other African countries. Youth poured into the streets in Senegal. In Ivory Coast, the opposition pressed for cancellation of agreements with the World Bank. In Ghana, university students organized protest marches. Traoré's move created a domino effect. Africa was now awakening. Economic dependencies from the colonial period were being questioned. Young leaders were finding courage. Peoples were seeking their rights. The World Bank had never been so cornered in its history. Morrison's arrest destroyed the institution's reputation. If other African countries took similar steps, the institution's presence in Africa could completely end. With this move, Traoré became a hero not only for Burkina Faso, but for all oppressed peoples. Despite his young age, the courage and determination he showed inspired millions of people. The world order was now changing, and one of the pioneers of this change was Ibrahim Traoré. How events will develop from here is eagerly awaited. Will the World Bank back down, or will Traoré take even harsher steps? Will Morrison really be tried? Will other African countries take similar steps? The answers to all these questions will become clear in the coming days. Traoré's move also led to changes in global power balances. BRICS countries quickly made statements supporting Burkina Faso. Indian Prime Minister Modi said, "We support Africa's rightful struggle." Brazilian leader Lula da Silva called for joint struggle against imperialism. South African President Ramaphosa invited Traoré to Pretoria. Dissenting voices began to rise within the European Union as well. MPs from Spain and Portugal said the World Bank's Africa policies should be questioned. A group of senators from Italy sent a letter of support to Traoré. In Germany, Die Linke Party announced, "We support Africa's rightful demands." In Burkina Faso, people were living in a festive atmosphere. Students in schools were drawing pictures of Traoré. Vendors in markets were shouting, "We kicked out the World Bank." Special prayers were held in mosques and churches. The elderly were saying, "We haven't seen such a leader since Thomas Sankara." The footage of Morrison's arrest was worthy of Hollywood films. The shock on his face as he was put into the prison vehicle with handcuffed hands was reflected in all lenses. Although Western media avoided broadcasting these images, they were shared millions of times on social media. African youth commented, "History is being written." Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro made a surprise move by offering Burkina Faso discounts on petroleum products. He said, "The Bolivarian Revolution is also echoing in Africa." Cuban leader Diaz-Canel promised to send doctors and teachers. Iranian foreign minister stated, "The axis of resistance against imperialism is expanding." Great anxiety also began among World Bank employees. Hundreds of experts on duty in Africa began sending their families back to their countries. The World Bank office in Kenya increased security measures. Personnel in Nigeria began using their leave. The regional center in Ethiopia suspended its activities. The panic atmosphere continued on Wall Street. Funds investing in Africa suffered major losses. Fluctuations increased in commodity markets. Gold prices reached record levels. Experts began using a new term called the Traoré effect. Burkina Faso intelligence extracted even more damning documents from Morrison's computer. 10 years of correspondence showed how African leaders were bought. Details of coup plans, assassination lists, and dark operations emerged. Traoré decided to send these documents to the International Court of Justice. The African diaspora living in France organized large demonstrations. Tens of thousands of people marched in support of Traoré in Paris. In Lyon, Burkinabe students kept vigil in front of the consulate. Celebrations were held in African neighborhoods in Marseille. Even in the American Congress, voices supporting Traoré rose. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez from the progressive wing of the Democratic Party said the World Bank needs to be reformed. Bernie Sanders said, "I understand the rightful struggle of African peoples." Republican Rand Paul stated that foreign aid should be questioned. Notable statements also came from Turkey. While official authorities made balanced statements, great support rose from the public. Turkish users on social media showered Traoré with praise. Discussions began that Turkey, which has historical ties with Africa, should take a more active role in this event. Asian countries like Japan and South Korea maintained their silence. However, Africa experts in these countries said Traoré was right. Professor Yamamoto from Tokyo University commented, Africa's renaissance is beginning. Dr. Kim Park from Seoul said, this could be the harbinger of new world order. The Burkina Faso army was experiencing a complete victory atmosphere. Soldiers showed they were united behind Traoré. Generals announced, we are proud of our young leader. Pilots made victory flights in the sky. The people embraced the army. But one thing is certain, Africa will no longer be the same. New leaders will emerge following the path opened by Traoré. The exploitation system will be destroyed. African peoples will achieve the prosperity they deserve. And the pioneer of this will go down in history as the brave leader Ibrahim Traoré.
Yeah, so the African them not really agree with the overthrowing thing, Yes, the African them not really agree with it. And when we look on most head of state, including America and England, them are not really clean according to what you hear them tell about other people, like dictator and other people, like this and that. And them deal with Muammar Gaddafi and say the people them not really like him. But is that really true? Because for them propaganda machine is at rapid when it's ready to spread propaganda, So things will look good, it then make it look bad, and things will look bad, it make it look good. And we know the history of these superpowers over the years in propaganda. When them propaganda machines start to move, If them man they start to tell us that Jesus in a New York City, say when them done with it, you gotta believe that. For them propaganda machine is something else. So anytime they want to get with a leader, you hear them start to spread whole heap of things. And most of the time when them when they want to get out a leader, usually the leader was always an ally with them until the leader decides they're going to do something else. As we mentioned last week and week before, most of the man them where here rise up against America was one time partners with America. And most of the people them were, if you notice, even in a day we are going this or no, like all Egypt, Egypt is a strange place because Egypt, the people them in Egypt is now demonstrating against Israel. No, America don't want that. So Obama is calling on the government that has been set up to quickly get rid of that protest. No protest against Israel is recommended there at this moment. Because Israel is America's biggest ally. No. We are hear so much things about Gaddafi, but we want to mention some of the things them where about Gaddafi, really. I mean, really. As we are say, if you show me a leader where not have a serious problem with them people, them, well, because even in Jamaica right now, most Jamaican, as far as I see, have a problem with them prime minister and them government. Yes. Now, me could talk about some things in Libya. Because I will mention Libya, Gaddafi has been giving aid to a lot of African countries, and he was the one who called for the breakdown of the barriers that divide the different states in Africa. According to Gaddafi, it was placed there by white people, and it's time we tear down those barriers, those illusion. Gaddafi said, make we tear it down. It's one Africa, that people can move freely through Africa. So that was really one of the big things them about Gaddafi's pronouncements about Africa. And Gaddafi also made a apology for Arab slavery Africans who was enslaved by Arabs. Gaddafi make an apology. But inside a Gaddafi country, when Gaddafi was the leader, according to it go now, he is no longer the leader now, and NATO bomb it. But the story we're going to is the next story, because we don't want to touch. We want to touch upon how them a kill off all of the black African them in Libya. I don't know how much you hear that news, but the Africans, especially those from Niger and Nigeria, is meeting hell. As a matter of fact, them go in our city yesterday. The population of 10,000 Traoré people from Niger. And Niger is the place where anytime you see them man, them camel and them face well wrap up from the sun. And them go in at the city, and there was no paddy in the city. And this was a city occupied by pure black Africans. How can a city with 10,000 inhabitants disappear like that? The people them just disappear. So the newsman went down there, and them here say them. Some of them say them people them run gone back to Niger, but 10,000 people. And we remember the killings in the hospital. It's pure black people. Yes, it dead in the hospital. Pure black people. I'm talking about black African. I'm talking about south of the Sahara. Black till them blue. So there is a serious killing that is taking place by these so-called rebel people. And the killing is addressed at and to all Africans who black. And when we say black now, we are talking about like me and you who are listening, most of you who are listening. We don't hear NATO who is still bombing the place. We don't hear them coming out and talking about this serious problem. What is this massacre of black people that is taking place in Libya by these rebels, these so-called rebels, who is claiming that a lot of these black people is militias that was employed by pro-Gaddafi followers. When we hear them attack, we hear Nigerians, I give them testimony. I said them live there for years and I work in Libya. Them don't know nothing about recruiting for go into no army for fight against rebel them. Yet still, women are being raped. Black women we are talking about now, and black man is being killed. I mean, if you see the hospital, man, where the reporter them going a man, the man them go in at the hospital where the most black African them there and wipe out the whole of the African them. Why? Anyway, we don't know how them are going to deal with this now. We don't know how them are going to deal with this now, because we know say America, France, and England is the main instigators of this cruel act against the Libyan people. There is no electricity bill in Libya. Electricity is free for all of its citizens. That is the report that we get here, that in Libya, people don't pay electricity bill. There is no interest on loans. Banks in Libya are state-owned and loans given to all its citizens at 0% interest by law. Now we know the Islamic one of Islamic tendencies is when them lend you money, them don't take interest. So I guess as a Muslim head of state, Muslim government, them follow suit and don't take interest. Can you imagine you live in a state Well, when you go to the bank and borrow money, them not charge you no interest. Well, that was what was happening in Libya. There's no interest and loans in the banks in Libya. Home, which is owning a home in Libya, is considered a human right in Libya. All newlyweds in Libya receive $50,000 by the government to buy their first apartment, so to help start up the family. We are talking about Libya under Gaddafi now. Libya under Gaddafi. A newlywed in Libya received $50,000 by the government to buy them first house to start up their family. This is what we are called about. No, this is what we are talking about dictatorship and all these things, you know. I mean, this is some serious things there. Education and medical treatments are free in Libya. Before Gaddafi, 25% of Libyans were illiterate. Before Gaddafi, which is like 40 years ago. Before Gaddafi, 25% of Libyans were literate. Were literate. Today, the figure is 83% literate. So I reverse it. So really and truly, 17% of the population is illiterate. Before Gaddafi, 25% of the population was literate. So in farming, we are reading this thing here. In farming, if you want to become a farmer, if you use farming as your career, you are given farming land, a farming house, equipment, seeds and livestock to kickstart your farm, all for free. If you decide say you want to start a farm, you are given seeds, equipment, farming house, farming land, all for free. If Libyans cannot find the education or medical facilities they need in Libya, the government fund them to go abroad for it, not only free, but they get $2,300 per month accommodation and car allowance. This is if you want to further your education. In Libyan, if a Libyan buys a car, the government subsidizes 50% of the price. And listen to this one, you know. Listen to this one, you know. The price of petrol, I'm talking about the US dollar though. The price of petrol in Libya is 14 cents per liter. Boy, multiply 14 by 84 in that Jamaica, you know. That's a serious thing. 14 cents by 84. This is US. The price of petrol in Libya is 14 cents per liter. Libya has no external debt, meaning say the Libyan government, the country of Libya no owe nobody no money. And its reserves amount to $150 billion, which is now frozen globally. Libya has no external debt. We're talking about a government under Gaddafi. It has no external debt and its reserve amount to $150 billion. Now frozen. No, this is a big one, you know. We want to read this one here. This is a big one because this is a man who's supposed to be a terrible tyrant, a terrible this, a terrible that. And as we are saying, we know we can name out enough Gaddafi contemporary who in a power right now where nobody now invade them country, nobody now bomb them, and them create havoc upon the lives of people. If a Libyan is unable to get employment after graduation, the state would pay the average salary of the profession as if he or she is employed until employment is found. A portion of Libyan oil sale is credited directly to the bank account of all Libyan citizens. A mother who gave birth to a child receives $5,000. 40 loaves of bread in Libya cost 15 cents. 40 loaves of bread in Libya cost 15 cents. 25% of Libyans have a university degree. 25% of Libyans have a university degree. Gaddafi carried out the world's largest irrigation project, known as the Great Man-Made River Project, to make water readily available throughout the desert country. I want the people them hear them statistics there. This is a man who we are supposed to know deemed wicked, murderous, need to go try in Hague. And we can tell you of a lot of leaders who was never carried to Hague, who have destroyed the way of life of people. 40 loaves of bread in Libya cost 15 cents. 25% of Libyans have a university degree. 25% of the population have a university degree. But we are now supposed to follow the media when a man who was killing Americans in Afghanistan went back to Libya and now is running what we call a semi-government that was the government that was overthrown by NATO forces, including America, England, France, to name some of them. What are we to think if we trace the history of these people, these politicians? How come we not hear no big alabaloo now against the so-called rebel forces who is torturing, raping, and murdering black Africans? How is it that a whole city of Africans disappear just like that? How is that possible? We're going to read this because it caught me. It caught me, man. It caught me because me listen to news all the while, all in Jamaica. It's like we are hearing news about a shooting we're going in a studio, mostly last night or night before last, and we hear the report in the paper one way, but the next day, like today, we are read the next report, and it not got nowhere like how it did report first originally. It not got nowhere like that. So we don't know, no, because the media, anybody control the media. The media is the most powerful entity in the society. And when certain people, you hear about Rupert Murdoch decide if you go to war or if you don't go to war, what you eat, what you wear, because he's the most powerful media man on earth. It's a serious thing. So we're gonna read this. We're gonna read this. The article say disappeared. Thousands of Libyan blacks turn up missing in rebel offensive. I don't know how much of you hear this news here. How much of you hear this news here, but we want to read it. Thousands of Libyan blacks turn up missing in rebel offensive. Entire city depopulated, declared closed military area. You hear them designate that area now? Closed military area. September the 13th, 2011. Before the Libyan civil war, Tawaga was an agricultural city of some 10,000, mostly black people, with an economy centering around palm trees and date production. Today, it is entirely empty and declared a quote-unquote closed military area by the rebels. But where did the Tawargans go? That's not such an easy question to answer. This is a real thing going on, and it's not a movie, you know. The rebels rounded them all up and herded them into a refugee camp in Tripoli. But reporters that went to Tripoli found the camps empty as well, with the only person there, someone looting scrap metal out of one camp, declaring that they had gone to Niger. You know, that is across the border where them claim say Gaddafi good run go. No, Tripoli residents near the camp, however, report that the Tawargans had indeed been in the area, in the camp at one point, but that the camp itself was attacked by forces from Misrata. They beat the men, rounded up the women and children, and took them away in trucks. They believed the troops were taking them to another camp in another part of Tripoli. That camp, too, was empty. Black people have been disappearing all across Libya, with rebels arresting people simply on the basis of skin color. But how does a whole city go missing? It may be quite some time before we learn exactly what happened. But we have hints in media reports dating back to June, when Misrata rebels began openly talking about cleansing the region of blacks. To read that again, you know. This is where we are talking about, you know, who can we trust? Who can the people trust? These things is happening. The big news CNN and all these people not going to talk about it until an American bust it out in America. And they hear one big alabaloo. Misrata rebels began openly attacking about cleansing the region of blacks, and were saying that black Libyans might as well pack up because Tawaga no longer exists, only Misrata. Fast forward nearly 3 months from this proclamation, and we have an empty city where Tawaga once stood. The only sign saying Tawaga has been covered up with a new sign saying New Misrata. So, one whole city of black people missing. One whole city of black people missing. And no one knows where these people are. And this is not a movie where some spaceship take out the people them and gone in some planet. This is real thing a go on in the 21st century. In Libya, black people are killed because they are black. In Africa. And that's the irony of that, no. And that's the irony there, you know. And that's the irony there. The irony is that black people is being killed in Africa because them black. In a one country where America and England decide, say, Gaddafi can't stay there. So they have to get rid of him. And now them side with some people who used to kill them. Islamic people. All of these uprising get out what you call a man who might be not so religious, yes, in place of a Islamic mindset. And we know say there's a war going on against Islam, even though them claims it's not a war against Islam, but it's a war against Islam. Christianity versus Islam. Bush set that pace in Iraq and in Afghanistan. So we are say, which part them African they there? These black Africans, are they back in Niger? Or were they buried in the sands, in the Libyan desert? We see on our television and in our newspaper where black Africans were slaughtered in the hospital. As a matter of fact, we have watched some serious clips of Africans being killed by NATO forces, beheaded, who believe that these civilized people from NATO forces is made up of all the whitest superpowers we can find on earth, who would believe that they would go into a country and behead people. That is going on in Libya today. Today, that is going on in Libya. This is no joke business. This is a country that don't owe nobody no money. That 25% of them population have a degree. That you don't have to pay for light. Can you imagine we there so? And have a dictator. And we now, even though he's a dictator, according to how dictator go. Look on all country them where them demonize. Look on all Cuba. Look how America demonized Cuba for 40 years. Them a try kill Castro. And we grew up going here say Castro one devil. Communist devil. We grew up come hear that. And look on Cuba. We now get no money from Russia. Now get no money from nowhere. Self-reliant. Embargoed against Cuba for 40 years now or more. And them still survive. Them have the best doctors in the Caribbean, maybe not in the, maybe in the world. The best doctors, medical service, health service, and education is free from that dictator. No, look on this dictator, Gaddafi. Medical service, light bill, free. Them help you with farming tools and things to start up your farm. 25% of the population, 25% of the population have a university degree. That one they hold me, that one they hold me more than anyone. So what are we to believe now? What are we to believe when these people tell you things? When you hear all these things happening in the world, what are we to believe? Or is it that these people can sell us these things in our consciousness and we just gulp it down just like that. Just like that. Believe in it to the T, to the core. We believe them. All the while, we believe them. Yes, Cotton Edge.
MUTA.
Yes, sir.
Oh, blessed. You know, oh, may I listen to you talk to God of you, and when I hear you mention one important aspect where I'm doing in my life, you know, and that him write a book. You know,
What the book name?
It named The Green Book.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we never mentioned that, that's true.
Yeah, well, you know, it just shows that the man have another side to him when enough leaders not really have.
Yeah.
You know, man, so a real artistic and intellectual side for can compose them thing there.
Yeah, man.
You know, man, say.
You know, anytime him talk, them always report on the Gleaner, him not the Gleaner, on the news, CNN say, him is a madman. Do him talk, like when him did say, you know, American have something to do with the 9/11 situation there.
Yeah,
when him talk about the flu, the swine flu, when them come up with, it's like them I say, wait, this man is a madman. And what am I say? And then when him say Al Qaeda involved in the rebel uprising against him, CNN come out and say this man is a madman. Yet still know them come realize say the man who lead the thing used to kill Americans in Afghanistan. You know, so.
But even when in 2009, I think when him there give a speech at the UN, when them have them annual leaders thing where everybody go speak for them little time, you know, and him tear up the UN charter. You know, may I say, and the critics after that say him is a bad man, you know.
Yeah, man. And him go live in a tent. When him go to America, him never go to a hotel, him have him one tent and a pure woman and bodyguard.
Yeah.
Why that easy?
I know say that to show another side of the man and the mind, because, you know, Islamists or Muslim people not really have women in that regard to make them bodyguard, you know what I say? So the man really,
a pure woman, him did have a bodyguard him in I think a New Jersey, him set up a tent, you know.
Yeah, free.
Yeah, man. I mean, we not going to listen to what them I say, you know. Trust me, we not going to listen to what them I say. A pure propaganda them I spread, man.
Yeah, man. So, where you think him there? Where you think him
When me think him there?
Yeah.
Negril.
You don't know. Give thanks to him.
Yeah, I blessed man.
All right,
yes, cool. Cut to the edge. I FM, we're there with you.